On to the West region. Starting off with the first matchup on Thursday, second-seeded Arizona, about a 7-point favorite. They covered against Dayton. Probably pretty lucky to do so. Against six-seeded Clemson. I have Final Four futures on the Tigers going back to mid-February. Total in this game is right around 152.5. Eric, I'm going to go break down this one first, just because you know I am a Clemson Tigers stan. And as we talked about last week, I do not just side with my futures bets, but my raw numbers make this around Arizona -5, which I want to hear your numbers. I intentionally didn't look at them just to kind of hear them firsthand on the podcast. But you look at Arizona and how they upended the Dayton Flyers in the first round, winning by 10 after closing 8.5. Now this line is a 1.5-point differential from that, at least on Monday night. I think Clemson's a 1.5 better. And again, my numbers make this Arizona -5. And then you go back to Dayton, top 5 3-point shooting team in college basketball efficiency-wise. They shot 29.2% against Arizona on Saturday afternoon. And Deron Holmes missing 2 huge front-end 1-and-1s, which easily could have flipped the game, at least within regards to the point spread. And Arizona, keep in mind, shot 52.8% from the field. So I know Arizona's offense is elite, but when you think about theoretical regression, maybe Caleb Love, cough, cough, I think that could happen for the Wildcats here. And then going back to Clemson, lone underdog to cover and win outright, but officially win outright, the only dog to do so in the round of 32. And they hung on against Baylor. When you go back to the latter part of that game, Jacoby Walter missing 2 big free throws down the stretch to give Clemson a chance to pretty much ice the game. And so I'm not saying Clemson didn't receive any positive variance themselves, but keep in mind they were up 16 with 5 minutes to go. One other thing I really like about Clemson's path so far, P.J. Hall averaging just 12.5 points per game in the NCAA tournament. Clemson has gotten to this point without P.J. Hall having a huge game. So you think about just intuition-wise, that's a huge bonus for Clemson, assuming Hall doesn't get in foul trouble like he did against Baylor and kind of like he did against New Mexico, even though Clemson pretty much had that game in hand. And Hall also has a matchup advantage, assuming Ballo guards him, because Hall can drag Ballo out from the inside of the arc. And we saw Ballo wasn't really comfortable when Holmes faced up against him, unless Holmes was going back to the basket, which is when Dayton's offense was really at its worst, at least in my opinion. Looking at Clemson defensively, Brownells has done a great job with his defensive scheme, mitigating the man-to-man defense and kind of going more softer man and more zone, which mitigates what we see with the defensive weaknesses, Joe Girard especially, and then Chase Hunter, who has played better at that end of the floor, but still not your best defensive guard. Arizona, they allow and rank number 334 in mid-range attempt rate allowed, and they rank number 203 in three-point attempt rate allowed on your site. Clemson thrives in the mid-range with Hall, Hunter, Girard, and Shefflin to an extent, and if they can get those 2-point looks in the mid-range, get those 3-point looks, they play 5 out, you control the pace, they're elite on the defensive glass. If Jack Clark is able to slow down Pele Larson at the other end, I don't just think Clemson covers, man. I think Clemson wins the game outright.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think that Clemson is, when you look at I hate to say they're a poor man's Arizona because they're completely different styles, but if you look at the offense and defensive ends, Arizona 12th, Clemson 24th, Arizona 5th, Clemson 41st. Not particularly great defensively, but if you look at it, it's a pretty balanced team in Clemson. The one concern that I've always had about Arizona is that Arizona, just you're waiting for it to happen. They're not the most consistent team in the world. And you see it where they just happen to fall asleep at times, where head-scratchingly so, where they lose at USC by 13. They lose to Oregon in the Pac-12 final by 8 in that game. As you stated, Clemson has really kind of not played their best basketball, and I think they can play better. And I don't think we've seen Arizona play their worst basketball yet. So looking at my numbers right now, I currently have, and this is based on the average performance throughout the season, I currently have Arizona favored in this game by about 6 with an over-under of about 150.5. That being said, I'm looking at this again, and I'm thinking of these teams ups and downs and how you can trust them. Now, I've never trusted Arizona for a long time. I still think they're snake bitten, and they've gotten through the first 2 rounds. But in my opinion, I think something's due to happen here. I think Clemson has not played its best basketball yet. You can see them really come out and build another big lead on Arizona. And then you were talking about what happens if Arizona falls behind. Yes, they can play their pace. They're 21st in the country in game pace. But all of a sudden, Clemson, 257th, if they can somehow build a lead and slow down this game, that will be frustrating for Arizona, making them play defense. It's going to wear them out at the offensive end. I'm going to strongly contemplate picking Clemson to spread or to cover the spread here, if not outright go on the money line for Clemson.
And if Clemson controls the pace, who knows what Caleb Love we get in this game. Right.
He's been, there was one of my problems. I've always kind of had the same problem with a Terrence Shannon. I've had the same problem with Kihei Clark last year, with Caleb Love. It's always one of those guys that I for whatever reason, you're waiting for something bad to happen. And when things go against them, it seems like Caleb Love tries to put everything on his shoulders, a little bit like Wade Taylor did for Texas A&M. Sometimes that really backfires. You can't have that happen. You got to be a team player. And I'm not so sure we've seen Caleb Love in that situation yet in this tournament. If that happens and Clemson builds that lead and all of a sudden he tries to take on too much himself, that could be problematic for the Wildcats.
So far, we're aligned on UConn at least advancing, aligned on Illinois advancing, and maybe, just maybe, at least aligned on Clemson to cover the point spread and keep it closer. I mean, we touched on this off air. Oregon, definitely one of the unluckier teams when it came to covering the number and then also winning straight up. Probably should have beaten Creighton, but Dayton should have covered the point spread when you go back to that game. I know Holmes' 2 free throw front end misses were their only free throw misses, but you don't shoot 29% on an average day if you're Dayton, considering they're top 5 in 3-point efficiency on the season. So I'm with you. I loved your take on, we haven't seen Arizona play out their worst. We haven't seen Caleb Love play at his worst. Yeah, and they are individually and collectively 2 of the more inconsistent commodities in college basketball.